Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Let's start our video with a story about why you should respect your camping neighbors. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Bad camping neighbors. I was driving cross-country home from college 2 weeks ago. My brother flew out to help me. Our plan was to stay at friends/family's houses and camp. Everything went very smoothly and we were having a fantastic time until we arrived after dark at our last camping spot before getting home. There were 45 campsites with 2 being used. One was a large, loud family and the other was a group of loud, middle-aged fisherman types. So being very tired from driving all day, we chose one near the back of the campground away from the loudness. We set up the tent, ate a quick dinner, and went to bed about 11. About 1:30 in the morning, another large bilingual family of at least 8 people, including at least one kid around 8, shows up and picks the site right next to us, even though the whole place was basically empty. They proceed to make a huge ruckus, setting up a giant tent not 10 feet from us, arguing, shining light all over. They left the headlights pointing right at our tent, starting a fire, kids yelling and running around. It was absolutely ridiculous. Keep in mind the campsite is supposed to have quiet hours too, from 10 to 6. After this goes on for about an hour, I'm fed up, so I politely tell them, in their native language, which I happen to speak with a bad accent but understand fluently, that we're trying to sleep. They say, "Oh, just give us a minute." 3 a.m. rolls around and they have finally finished with the tent and are settling down and begin to make fun of my brother and I in Spanish, which we clearly understand, mind you, about how we were dumb for complaining to them. Wow, now that's just way over the top. They're clearly all super inconsiderate and obnoxious human beings that deserve a rude awakening, and my little bro and I start to plot our revenge. We set an alarm for 5:30 a.m. as we were planning on an early start the next day anyways. The next morning, we don't take any care in being quiet campers. We talk in outside voices, drop the bike chain a couple times, slam car doors, leave the alarm going, put a rock in our trash and throw it in the empty dumpster near our campsite, turned headlights on facing their tent, and turned the car radio up when we drove away. We only woke up 2 of the party, but it sure felt good to deprive at least someone of a couple hours sleep. We found a sweet picnic spot an hour away and made pancakes and swam in the Colorado River. I hope they had a terrible morning. And our second story. Hey man, tools are meant to be used. A bit of a preface to this tale. I have a knife collection, all are carried and used, and I select my knives by quality of make, blade material, and function. The other bit of necessary info is that I share a hobby workspace with a friend, GG for great guy, and his idiot brother, IB. In this space, we carry out woodworking, smithing, and various other projects in our leisure time, together and separately. GG and I have similar philosophies about preparedness. We carry a minimal amount of quality tools and we maintain them and use them in a manner that facilitates their continued use. IB, however, enjoys a disorganized mess of tools in various states of disrepair and rust, which he keeps in the bed of his truck. He dislikes searching through his tool pile to find what he needs and often abuses tools to their breaking point, so he often borrows tools from myself and his brother. One day, while loosening some screws and metal plates, IB asks GG to see his knife. He was carrying a laser-marked OTF Benchmade Infidel with a custom cut blade release, worth about $500. GG assumed that IB wanted to cut a strip of rubber sheeting to aid in removing a stripped screw and handed over the knife. I watched EB return the knife a short while later. 5 minutes after receiving his knife back, GG actuates the knife to discover a chip half the size of a dime in the blade. IB had attempted to use the knife as a screwdriver. Cue a huge screaming match about why the hell wouldn't you use a screwdriver, culminating in a fistfight. A few weeks later, IB asked to use my knife. I explicitly tell him to only use it if he's going to cut something, to which he agrees. I hand over my knife, Ontario Rat 1 in D2, $40. I have 2 of these knives, and they aren't terribly expensive, but this particular knife accompanied me on a trip to a nasty sandbox earlier in life and ended up saving my butt. I replaced the AUS 8 blade when I was back, but the knife still has sentimental value. As it turns out, the something that IB cut was a paint can, and he ended up cutting it because he snapped the tip off my knife trying to pry the lid open, leaving the blade needing to be completely reground. I calmly tried to explain that I spend my money on quality tools and I respect their intended use because I want them to continue to be useful. Condescendingly, IB tells me that my P-word knife isn't quality if it got damaged by him using it. Tools are for using, he tells me. The next week, IB asked to borrow my knife. I ask him to explicitly explain what he wants to do with it. He scoffs and rolls his eyes before patronizingly explaining that he wants to cut twine. This seems reasonable. I walk over and hand him my knife. Spyderco Paramilitary 2, $110 to $150. He uses it normally, so I walk away to stop a heat-treating oven and remove the contents. He calls my attention from across the shop and yells, "Heads up," as he tosses my open knife to me from 30 feet away. I drop a hot piece of 1095 as I try to get out of the way of a knife that I spent an hour stopping down to half a micron edge before I watch it hit the floor, snapping off the tip. IB, of course, thinks my panic and then rage is hilarious and talks trash about my knife for breaking so easily. IB stops asking to borrow our knives after we refuse to loan them to him for a few weeks. He buys gas station cheapos and breaks them on a weekly basis, while telling us that it's no big deal because they aren't expensive. We smile and play along until the ribbing gets too much. I infer that since he has such a large knife budget, he can afford to replace Gigi and my knives that he's broken. He loses his temper and hems and haws about how we were able to do repairs and find replacement blades. I insist that he replace Gigi's infidel, as the customization work we did to the blade release voided the warranty. But he insists that it's Gigi's fault for loaning him the blade, so I let it go. Then get the idea that it'd be just fine to unscrew my vise and move it to a different table. I ask IB if I can borrow his Starrett electronic calipers, $2,500, a hot second, as my inferior calipers are unsuited for the work I'm about to do. Ego stroked, he lends me the tool. I move over to the first nut on my vise and tighten the calipers up. Gigi's eyes widen as he realizes my intentions. He looks away, a silent endorsement of my plan. I hold the calipers in place and begin to twist. And I don't stop. I cranked those MFers till they started to cry. I attempted to loosen, but holding my vise to the table before determining that the ruined calipers were simply a bad quality tool. Then I whipped them at IB from across the shop, yelling, "Heads up!" IB no longer asked to borrow anything from us and has since gotten his own workspace. He also threatened legal action after I refused to replace his calipers. I maintain that I'm not responsible for any damages, because hey man, tools are meant to be used. And our last story. This is private property, sir. A few pieces of scenario you need to keep in mind. I'm a student and I rent a shared old house with other students. The house has no garden, but there is a long paved space around. All walled, none of us can leave it since there was a second lockdown, so we have to stay in this space for daily activities. Second thing to know is that I recently picked up daily exercise since I recovered from the Big C. I'm not infected anymore, and I'm lucky there's space enough beside our house with a nice curb I can use to do some things I couldn't otherwise. Third thing is that this part of the paved space, even though close to the house, is the opposite way from the street door, which means that most people only go there to either park their cars, there are always some on the opposite side, or because they live in the garage next door, which shares the space. The garage isn't used for cars. I guess it's reconditioned as a tiny flat instead. All the houses around me are owned by the same landlady who lives somewhere close. Incident. I was doing squats there and minding my own business when this older neighbor, who I don't know because I moved in September, parks in front of the space. He starts moving towards me, so I greet him, which he doesn't reciprocate. Instead, he just states with the most proponent expression, "You know this is private property." I still don't know if he's another tenant or the husband of the landlady, so I suppose he might be right that I had no legalistic right to stand in this space nobody used to exercise. So I just answered that I was sorry and didn't know before picking my phone up and leaving. By this point, he already left towards the garage. This was unusual because this is a friendly little town, and I didn't think the person that used that space could care or even less prevent young people from exercising just because he didn't like to see it while getting out of his car. I'm very sure nobody inside the garage could know I was there and much less be bothered. I was raised to help people out, especially neighbors. You never know when they might need to help you, and this is frankly a jerk move in normal times and even worse during a lockdown. Maybe it also struck me as especially sucky-ish because I'm an anarchist and absolutely cannot fathom why someone would do something as to go out of their way just to be a jerk and deprive people from using an empty space just because it's yours. Either because he also rents it or he's married to the lady who owns tens of houses she just uses to get 80% of people's paycheck just for having inherited a paper. But rant finished. This is not the time to make revolutions. He had his chance to be a nice neighbor, and, well, he blew it. Next week, I see him again, and he's changing a tire that he obviously blew by clashing with the curb. I start exercising in the only available spot beside my door. Worst spot, but never mind. I see him struggle for a good 25 minutes with no avail before asking me if I could lend a hand. Now, I know how to do it and could absolutely help him. Even if I'm probably not physically stronger, he's in his 40s, I would absolutely help any other neighbor or passerby, but for this guy, I preferred to stand before his section of the pavement and tell him that I'm sorry, I can't get there as that's private property. Guy then just packed up his crap and went inside to call a tow truck. And I finished my exercise. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.